Good morning, council members. We need to start our meeting.
And I'm most likely going to be working tomorrow, but just remotely.
Okay.
We'll see. We'll see if I'm super sharp today.
Okay. Good morning. How is everybody this bright and early morning? It's great to see our planning and zoning people here. Good morning. Good morning. Actually, council, we're going to talk about our 7 a.m. meetings. Just because I realized the reason we do 7 a.m. is because of Darrell Bruner. But maybe we can talk about it and say, do we still want to do 7 a.m.? We could do 7:30.
Seven's better.
7's better? Okay. Well, we'll have a discussion about that. And to the others in the room, good morning. Good morning. Thank you for being here. We do have our tradition that I love, and that is that we open in prayer, and our council president, Councilman Reynolds, I'll get your name right, is going to open us in prayer this morning.
Dear Heavenly Father, thank you for this morning. Thank you that we can get together and talk about important issues. Please give us wisdom and watch over us today. Thank you for this wonderful city that we live in. In Jesus' name we pray, amen.
Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Okay. We do have Councilman Bills online, and I'm not sure if Councilman Rodriguez is on. Okay. Thank you for doing roll call.
Rodriguez. Chingula.
Here.
Bills. I know he's online. Reynolds.
Here.
Haverfield.
Here.
Griffin.
Here.
5 present, 1 absent.
Okay, well, good morning. As we get started this morning, we have a couple of items we're going to go through, and Tom Points is on first, and/or is that Jeff? Who's presenting this morning? Tom. Good morning. So Tom's going to talk about declining drain flow and irrigation storage ponds. I so appreciate the work of our team, the great work you guys do, and your forward thinking. So good morning.
Thanks, Council, for the time. Morning. So for the record, I'm Tom Point, Senior Public Works Director, and Jeff Barnes is our Water Resource Director. He's back here too to help answer questions. So I'm going to talk all things water today. Mainly we'll be focused on surface water and shallow groundwater, but also we can touch briefly on, or any questions you got about deep groundwater. Just to kind of set the stage, there's our drinking water from the city municipal system comes down 200 foot down in several sand layers. There's about 6 or 7 sand layers down there deep that are fed from a large drainage basin that goes all the way to Stanley. And so we've got a pretty good aquifer down there, and it's pretty stable even with all the growth that's happening. And it's gone down a little bit, but it's about 0.3 foot per year is what they've said, but it also recharges some too, so it's not too bad given all the growth that we've got. So that's something we do keep an eye on. There are some groundwater issues in certain parts of the valley, like over southeast Boise and then south of Lake Lowell. That's because you're not in that sand layers anymore, different media, basalts and rocks. So overall, our deep groundwater are doing well. And then on top of that, there's a confining layer that protects that deep groundwater. There's a clay layer, and then on top of that is where you have the surface and our shallow groundwater, which is we want to talk about today. We're seeing some issues with the shallow groundwater and also the surface water. And I wanted to bring some information towards you, council, because this will be important. You get a lot of questions about water supplies during some of the public testimonies, and I just wanted you to have the facts on what's actually happening out there, and also some solutions that we might want to think about for mitigation into the future that relates to development. So I'm not sure if anybody knows, but we've got, and this is some slides that we took from our Boise River Water Master. Mike Myers, he actually moved over to Black Canyon superintendent, but Jared Hoke was his assistant. He took over as a water master. So each basin in the state has a water master, and they're a sub-report to the Idaho Water Resource Board, and their job is to manage all of the water calls in that basin. And so in the Boise River drainage, we have multiple irrigation districts that pull water out of storage, out of the reservoirs, and also out of the river flow. And so what their job, and then also their job is to keep track of how much each irrigation district is calling for water. And it's a complicated equation because you've got river flow, storage in the reservoir, and then you've got water rights. So and the more senior water rights get the water first. So it's a little bit of a complicated equation. But they've got a very good system down in order to track water calls and what's available in storage and in river flow. What's going on here? There we go. Okay, so this is. Let's try that now. We got the microphone's active. Thank you. Okay, sorry about that. All right, so the Department of Water Resources funded this Treasure Valley Water Supply and Assessment Sustainability Project. And this is something that was requested by the Boise River Water Master. And what we're trying to do here is look at data on surface water flows, because the punchline is they're seeing a decline in drain flows. And drain flows downstream of us, which is a problem because those drain flows are feeding back into the Boise River and then being diverted back out by downstream irrigation districts like Riverside and Black Canyon. So there's not, if the drain flows are declining, there's less water that can be diverted back to those downstream users, which is the crux of the problem. And lots of those irrigation districts have the most senior river water rights, so they have the first right, and they will get the water first. So we need to figure out some sort of solution on what to do with the declining drain flows. So just a little history on the drains. The irrigation system was built before the 1900s. The New York Canal was constructed back then, and then after that was constructed, there was the shallow groundwater rose up, and that's because the New York Canal is unlined for the most part, and it loses 25% of its water out the bottom, ends up forming the shallow aquifer. So if you look downstream of the New York Canal, there's some pretty high groundwater. If you look upstream in New York Canal, there's really no groundwater, shallow groundwater, because it's all just seepage and it all flows northwest towards the Boise River. And so anyway, back when the New York Canal was originally constructed, it was a great idea. All this farm ground opened up, but then in our area in Caldwell and Lower Nampa, it was so much groundwater that it submerged some viable farm ground, and it made marshes and wetlands. And so what happened after the irrigation districts at that time, like, well, we need to do something to help these farmers. So what they did is they came in and they dug all these drains. And so the drains are like even though it's called Mason Creek is a drain. Indian Creek, portions of that are a drain. Wilson drain, that's Elijah drain. All of those are drains. They're all constructed at the low spots in the valley, and then they were connected back into the Boise River. And what they do is they collect that shallow groundwater that's seeping out of the New York Canal, lower the groundwater table so you have viable farm ground, and then put it back into the Boise River. So that's a little history on why the drains were put together. This is a schematic showing how the Boise River works. So this blue diagram you can see at the top, very top, let's see, towards the right is the Barber Park. So you can see there's a lot of, and this is supposed to be schematically to scale. You can see there's a lot of water that gets diverted out over at the Reidenbach Canal, and there's lots of other canals like Farmers Union that come out inside Boise and Garden the city, and then it gets consumed and those downstream from that, and then it comes back into the Boise River through the drainage system. So most of the drains are coming back into the Boise River between Middleton and Caldwell. And then, like I said, if you go down over to that US 30 on the Boise River, or that over by Caldwell, you can see there's several irrigation structures in there. That's where it starts diverting back out again. And so that's where the Riverside Irrigation District and Black Canyon divert their water back out. So this is this little schematics and pictures of the drain. You can see, imagine back then how difficult it would be to build all these, but there was that was a lot of work. So nice historical photos here from the 20s. Okay, so we talked about the drains, we talked about the river and what the River Master and what they do. This is some of the data that the River Master tracks. And so a lot of information here, but they track flows on certain reaches of the river and then track who's getting what, and they have gauges. So punchline here is that we had a problem in June 30 of 2022, which is actually not a bad water year. It was a decent water year. And there wasn't enough water in the Boise River to be able to provide the water call, and there were 150 CFS short. And what they had to do was, I mean, it didn't mean the river went dry. They just mean that they had to pull water out of the 240 CFS that is designated to flow through our area because of downstream users and fish uses, fish passage. So that's not something that you want to repeat, because the Bureau Rec didn't like that so much. And so that's why the Water Master decided we need to do a study and figure out what we need to do to correct this. What are we going to do? We don't want to. And I really appreciate the Water Master looking at this, because this is our opportunity as a region to collaborate and come up with something together. And if you look across the state, there's a lot of other regions that are fighting about water. Like East Idaho, there's lots of fights about it, and between surface and groundwater. We have an opportunity to come up with something as a region and not have fights. And this is the first step on it, to try to figure out what are we going to do together. So here's some of the drains I was talking about. Some of the ones that go through Nampa are Mason Creek. Let's see, 15 Mile Creek goes through our area. But I want to point out Mason Creek. That's one of the most significant ones. Mason Creek through Nampa actually goes through Lakeview Park and on out north through our industrial area, and then back to the Boise River and Caldwell. But you can see that over a 3-year period, the drain flow has decreased from 150 CFS on average to 75. So that's a significant amount of water that's been lost. And that's just one of the drains. So phase 1 of the study that Water Master is working on is to collect the data on all the drains, because we only have a partial data set at this point. I talked about phase 1 of the study. So phase 1 is collecting data. Phase 2 is going to be modeling what we find on the data and how it relates to the shallow groundwater and the drain flow, and then the retention time that it takes for that water to get back to the surface, from the groundwater to surface. That's phase 2. And phase 3 is mitigation. And what are we going to do about declining drain flow? Where do we find additional water, and how do we make the downstream users whole? So right now we're in phase 1. So this, again, a direct slide from the water master. We need to take a serious look at this and figure out what we need to do as a region. We don't want to get in fights, like I said, and downstream water rights could be shortened, and we don't, the punchline, and we just need to work together to come up with some good solutions. So one of the solutions is water conservation, but one thing I want to point out is that every time you do something upstream, you got to think about what it does to the downstream user. So, for example, when we did our reuse project at the wastewater plant, great project. It's recycling water. We got almost 5,000 acre feet a year that we're generating in water that ends up, instead of going into Indian Creek, it goes into the Phillips Canal and gets reused in Nampa, right? That's great. It's great for us. It's great for Pioneer Irrigation District. But there's another irrigation district downstream that was actually using that water, right? And so you got to think about them as well. What do you do for them? And so you got to talk to them. You got to come up with plans and different things that are help mitigate some of those situations. So, and that's what reduces the conflicts and reduces the fights, if you're all in it together and you're partnering on things. So I want to present a few ideas for the council to consider. There's little incremental things that we can do to add up to a lot if we work together to do this and have some good planning. Okay, so we're going to talk about why this is important. Just touch on our water conservation task force. I think most of you are aware of that, but I'll just do a quick highlight on it. A reuse project. We've got some peak demand irrigation storage projects, both on the water supply and the drains that we're looking at. And then one solution is to capture floodwater, which we can talk some about that and how to do that. And then I want to just a little bit on our constructed wetland and what that means for water rights and water supply. Okay, so like I mentioned before, surface water is something we really need to pay attention to. It's cyclic, it's subject to drought, and it's subject to climate change. So we have good years, we have bad years. We had a pretty good year last year, although we've got a lot of heat this year, so we'll see what that does to the water budget overall. It's always changing. In general, we've got a pretty good water supply with having 3 major reservoirs, Lucky Peak, Arrow Rock, and Anderson Ranch above us. If you add all that up, it's about 1 million acre feet of water. It's a decent size, so if you compare that to Lake Dorshak up north, that's 2 million acre feet. That's a huge, massive one, but if we've got 1 million acre feet, that's really good in a dry desert area. Most folks in an arid area don't have something like this, so should be lucky to have it, but we don't want to take it for granted. We need to make sure that we're doing the right thing when it comes to water conservation. Yeah, there's a figure on the deep groundwater, like I said, is declining some, but we're still pretty stable overall given all the growth. And I also just want to point out that it wasn't this session, it was last year's session. The legislators put together an Idaho code that basically says you should, when you're considering your water supply source, you should look at surface water first. And what they're really talking about is irrigation, because irrigation is a huge demand on our system. If you take the amount of groundwater that we pump out for drinking water, compare it to the amount of water we consume for irrigation, we use more volume in irrigation water in that 4 or 5 month period than an entire year of drinking water. It's a huge amount of water. So it's important to maximize our surface water, and we do agree with the Idaho code that was put together that we need to look at that first before we start putting straws into our deeper aquifer for irrigation. Yeah, we just talked about that one. So what we're doing on trying to solve this problem is a 2-pronged approach. We're going to look at building engineering projects, and we're going to work on getting the outreach out on water conservation. So the engineering projects, they work, they're expensive. So for example, our reuse project at the wastewater plant, voted by our people and through our wastewater advisory committee, was not the most cheapest alternative. It cost us another $70 million to recycle water, but it was the right thing to do, and that's what the community wanted. But it does work, and it does conserve water. Outreach materials, which I'll show you some of those to get the word out on how to properly water, much less expensive. You know, it's a continuous thing, and that's Jeff and his team. They're talking about One Water. They're putting out information. They've got our stormwater group and our environmental group. They're constantly out doing outreach on water, and we've got our operation folks during this time of year. They're trying to hand out materials if they see people overwatering, and you got water going down the gutter. So we're doing our part. I think we're making some small incremental changes, but it does take some time. Okay, so our drought task force, this has been a really great committee. So we started this when if you remember a few years ago, we got a little bit of a drought scare. There was a lot of, at the 11th hour, we got some water and it filled up our reservoirs, but it was looking pretty bad and we weren't sure what we were gonna do. So we put together this task force, which included the school, major users like the school district, parks, public works. We had all of our irrigation districts there, and we had some of our, like the University of Idaho with their water group, the Soil Conservation Service. We had all kinds of folks coming out wanting to help. And then we had Master Gardens, or different people that know about soils. We had Josh Samsos, he was part of the team. There's a lot of passion about water when it really comes down to talking about it. And it really showed when we had our workshop with water conservation and proper watering. We had over 300 people show up to that workshop and want to know how to properly water. So it seems like people want to know the right thing to do, but didn't really know what to do. A lot of people overwater their lawns and they're not really sure. They'll see brown spots in their lawn and they'll just put more water on it, but that's not always the solution. It's deep watering and less frequency on the watering is the ticket to it to get the roots down deep. So anyway, this has been a great committee. We've since renamed it to the Water Conservation Committee. We still meet and come up with different things that we're trying to do as a region. Because Nampa can do everything that we can in our control, but we're just one straw in the aquifer. We've got all the rest of the valley. So the good news is we've had Acuna joined our team. We've had Caldwell join our team. We've had other Viola come over and look at what we're doing as well. We're getting a lot of attention. And the State Water Resource Board has also noticed what we're doing as well, which is really good. Yeah, here's a list of some of the folks. And then some of the water associations, I forgot to mention them. We got the Idaho Water Rural Association that's come, the Idaho Water Users Association, which is part of the state association that represents all the irrigation districts. So we tried to get everybody involved to help us out with this. Here's some of the materials. I think you may have seen some of this. We came up with this landscaping guide, which is on the far right. We have this on our website. It's got lots of good QR codes in there. It tells you how to do water audits and proper amount of water to put down on your lawn. And 2 inches is what you need to do per week. And it also gives you different types of how to fertilize, different types of plantings. There's some grasses out there that are tall fescues that take, instead of the Kentucky bluegrass that most people plant, this tall fescue, has a very deep root and it takes 25% of the water that a Kentucky bluegrass does. So, and Parks has been implementing some of these as well, which has been good. And I know that Planning and Zoning has worked on some different changes to our codes for the landscaping in front of subdivisions based on some of this information as well. So we're making some good progress on this, and we've been handing this out and trying to educate people as much as we can. So one of the goals that we had back in the original on the drought task force was to use less water in general. So our goal was to use a little bit less water on the irrigation side each year. And so we asked our irrigation team, the pressurized irrigation team, and kind of gave them a tougher task. It said, how much less water can you actually put through the system and still maintain the pressure? So instead of 100%, they put 70%. in. And it actually worked, which was good. And so we saved that 30% of water during that. So during that season, that adds up to quite a bit. And what that means is there's more water in storage that can be used by us or others in the valley. So that was a good thing. You know, you need to optimize your system. And then so we're continuing to monitor. This is all the data that we go through. We've got, I'm not going to go through each one, but we got graphs for each irrigation district, and we can dissect it into anything you want to look at. We've got automated systems on all our pump stations that give us real-time data, and we can come up with all this information. I think I already mentioned this. This is the reason that surface water is so important to talk about and watch is because it's the volume of water that's there. Most of it is surface water when it comes down to irrigation. Nampa in our system is mostly surface water. We do have some groundwater that we use, but most of it is the shallow groundwater that's artesian wells that we pull. So it's basically the same as the surface water. We have one deeper irrigation well, and that's over on the green south over there by Lake Lowell, so the southwest part of town, because that's one spot we're having a little bit of trouble with our water, and that's normal. Like I said, it's as you get more towards Lake Lowell, things get a little more difficult on the groundwater side. So here's our irrigation surface water. We use 13,000 acre feet a year. So put it in perspective, Lucky Peak is 264,000 acre feet. Okay, so we talked about our water conservation, and I want to talk, and it was a two-pronged approach. So we talked about the outreach. Now I want to talk about some of the mitigations that we can do. So Class A recycled water, that's definitely a water conservation mitigation. The peak demand irrigation storage ponds, I have some slides on that. That was about $6 million. We did get a grant for half of that from the Idaho Water Resource Board, which was really good. And we're looking to do some recharge ponds near some creeks and drains. And that one will be another $6 million. We're still looking for funding and partners on that one. Let's see. So Class A, I think you're pretty familiar with this. Like I said, we're generating 5,000 acre feet per year of savings, which equates to additional storage in the reservoirs, which extends out the season. We're also reserving ourselves some capacity for industrial reuse. So we're looking at that as trying to build a pipeline at some point up north, looking for grants for that. Just as a reminder, for those that have been on council through the beginning of this whole process, we originally started this water recycling project as a water quality project. And so it saved us quite a bit of money to be able to put the water into the Phillips Canal instead of Indian Creek during the summer, because we reduced or eliminated a cooling tower, which was $20 million. We never wanted to build a cooling tower. Cooling towers are, none of us in Public Works want to build cooling towers. We think it's environmentally not the best idea, and they don't last very long. So this was a good solution on the temperature, and then also the phosphorus. It helped, we matched the phosphorus level in the canal. We didn't have to take as much out, and that saved us another $20 million. So it was a $40 million savings on a water quality project, and that was the original plan for recycled water. But then as we got through this, looking at the numbers, we realized this is also a water conservation project, and that's what got the attention of the Water Resources Board and got us some funding on the grant side. So we've come to the realization that most of these water projects, even if it's a water quality project, it often has a water conservation or some other benefit to it that you could recognize. Okay. So that was a good project. And another one we're looking at is peak demand storage. So the Boise River flows, it goes into the Phillips Canal, it goes into these pump stations that are along the canal, and then it goes into our pressurized irrigation system. And all that works great, but the issue is that everybody tends to turn the water on at the same time. So they'll turn it on at night because they want their lawn to be dry during the day, so they can go picnic and use it for whatever they want to use it for with their kids and family. And so we get this really big demand at night and very early in the morning. So it's about 3 times what it is during the day. So what issue that causes is that you have to turn the gate on in the Boise River, the irrigation districts do, to that peak demand, because it takes 24 hours from the diversion of Boise River and Phyllis Canal for that water to get to Nampa. And so they can't be changing it every 12 hours for us. So it has to be set at whatever the peak is. So there's a lot of water during the non-peak that flows by us, which isn't, I don't want to put the impression it's wasted water. It's not. It gets reused by lots of downstream irrigation districts. But if we're able to manage this water better and keep it up in the storage, that means that we can just manage it differently and keep irrigation systems running longer. So our goal is to try to come up with a way to handle that peak flow. And so one way to do that is to, near these pump stations I talked about that pull the water out, if we could build a pond next to the pump station and the canal, and during the low flow, so during the middle of the day, divert water into that pond, and during the night and the early morning, pump it back into the system. So that helps shave off the peak of that demand. And so what that ends up doing is the irrigation district can ratchet down the gate some and save some water and not have to send as much, because we're having on-site storage to be able to handle the demand. So, like I said, the Water Resource Board's been supportive of us and all of our conservation efforts. We got some funding on our reuse project, and we also got funding for this Copper River pump station. So this is over at, let's see, sort of by Lake Lowell. This is kind of on the southwest part of town. And this is part of Nampa Meridian Irrigation District system. This is a pretty large pump station that serves a lot of residents. We did get a grant. Part of it was for reuse, but part was for this storage pond. So we got $3 million from the Water Resource Board. And like the numbers say here, there's a lot of water that flows by. 34% of the water order flows by without a pond. So if we're able to capture that, that's a third of the savings. So little incremental things like this really add up. So if we had several of these across the city, you know, and you're gaining 1,500 acre feet a year, that's some pretty good mitigation that we're able to supply for downstream users for other projects that we're trying to do in the city and the region. So drains, I just mentioned the one I just showed you was the canal, right? So that's the water that goes out of the Boise River into our pressurized irrigation system. The drain water is return flow that ends up from the farms and also from the shallow groundwater that just recharges the drain. So they're also, like I said, they're seeing the decline as well. But they also have the peaks and the same peaks and flows, and it's based on the farmer doing the same thing that the subdivisions are doing. They'll turn it on at night, and then or during the day, and then it'll come back all at the evening time. And so we've got they go down, up and down as well. So we're looking for some near creeks and drains. We're looking for some places we can put some ponds. So I'm building all these scenarios up to kind of give you some information about our land use and what we can think about in some of the undeveloped areas in our impact area. Okay, so imagine having some of this area up north that's not developed yet, near some like 15-Mile Creek, Mason Creek, and we talk to the irrigation districts and say, where's a good spot? And because the irrigation districts are great partners, they know what the plumbing is and they know where good spots to put storage and where not to put storage. So we could engage them and ask them, where's the best spot to put a pond like this that we're talking about? And they can tell us that, and then we could put that on one of our planning maps and have that as, okay, this is a spot that we'd like to target as a future pond, And as it develops, we could incorporate that into the development. And one thing that we could do, which our code actually allows today, is allow these ponds to be qualified open space. There's some requirements, which I'll go through the code in a minute, and I know that we got the planning team here if there's any questions about it. It's allowed today, but there's some things we need to add amenity-wise to make that qualified, but that would help us a lot on the water conservation. So you're doing a couple things. You're helping out with mitigation, you're helping out with water conservation, you're building an amenity for the community, and the developers getting the qualified open space. So I think that's important that we plan ahead in this way and start thinking forward, because once the subdivision's there, it's going to be very expensive and difficult to build something like this. We might be able to go build one in a park that's existing, but like I said, it's not always the right plumbing spot. Some things don't always work for the irrigation districts because of the restrictions in some of their systems. So here's the code. I'll just read it real quick. Multi-use facilities that provide other benefits beyond active recreation and that integrate into the character and the plan development and complement of the surrounding open space and corresponding amenities may also count towards the total percentage of qualified space. Examples include, but not limited to, permanent pools or active passive recreation, constructed wetland, wildlife habitat areas, landscape features designed to mimic natural spaces. So has to have some recreation element to it. And you're getting a nod over there, so some pathways around it, some amenities, but you could use this as an open space, as a pond. So there's some planning things that we need to do. I just wanted to float this concept by council to get it on your radar. The next steps would be for us to talk to the irrigation districts about their plumbing, kind of put some things on a map, go through planning and zoning, and kind of talk about what that might look like on a next comp plan revision. So there'll be more to come on that, but I just wanted to let you know it's important for us to think this way, because we're not always going to have surface water. We need to come up with different ideas. Okay, so another idea is capturing and storing flood water. So Nampa actually submitted a grant to the Idaho Water Resource Board to their flood mitigation program. They have $1 million a year that they give to entities that want to take care of flooding problems. Most of the time it's for pipes or riprap or something like that. That's some physical. But just this week, they asked us for a presentation on one of our planning studies. So, and we did get, it looks like the finance committee said yes to the board, so we're not totally funded yet, but looks like they're going to give us $120,000 to work on a planning study to come up with mitigation sites to store flood water. And so there'll be a match from us. But what we're going to do is go talk to the rest of the valley about participating in that, because this is a regional project. We're not looking just at Nampa. We're looking at the whole Boise River drainage on where you can store flood water. So flood water, there's a million acre feet of water that is up in the reservoir. We have another 1 million acre feet that flows by us during flood stage. And so if we could capture some of that, or just a portion of it, and put it into a pond, we could reuse it during the irrigation season, during the declining drain flow. Or if it's an unlined pond, it could pop up downstream in a drain anyway and recharge some of these declining drain flows, because that's how it works. If you're upstream pond near the Boise River, it'll infiltrate down and go subsurface and end up in a low point, maybe a mile or 2 or 3 mile downstream in a drain somewhere. And so that's how the hydrology works. So that we're able to model that and come up with credits on how much water that would be. So we're looking at this point, we're mainly just looking along the Boise River. The New York Canal and Lake Lowell, that's a discussion we'll have later with Boise Project. They haven't signed up for this analysis yet, but they want to watch and be a partner maybe in the future. So, Okay, here's some of the numbers, like I said. So we have to maintain 240 CFS as a base flow in order to make downstream users whole. That's a year-round requirement, but anything above and beyond that is fair game to capture during a flood stage. So, so put it in perspective, some of the flood waters we get are 3,000 to 5,000 CFS. So you got a lot of water that we could capture somehow if we could find something large enough to do that with. So what we've engaged, there's lots of other partners that need to happen on this. So we've talked to the Water Master. They gave us a letter of support. The Flood District 10, they give us a support, so they take care of the Boise River. And then we got the Treasure Valley Water User Association, so they represent all of the irrigation districts in the valley, and they give us a letter of support because they think this has a lot of value. They want to try to partner and resolve this without some sort of conflicts. And so far, all of our agencies have been great. Our local irrigation districts, Pioneer and Nampa Meridian, have been really good, very helpful on talking about plumbing and different alternatives for us. So it's been a good project so far. And like I said, this is a regional project. And so we're not just looking at Nampa here, we're looking at the whole valley. And the reason that we think Nampa would be a good fit to help lead this is because of our connection between transportation and water. We have both resources. It's a little bit unique in this valley. Like Boise doesn't have transportation, and neither does Meridian. Yeah, but we do, we've got that. And what that does is it opens up the doors to talk to all the partners in the valley, because we know transportation agencies, we know water agencies, we know the transportation agencies that have gravel pits that they want to do something with. We know contractors that have gravel pits they want to reclaim and do something with. So we can tie those two together and really kind of do something special for the valley. So that's what we're thinking on that one there. So we're excited about this project, and we're glad that it looks like we're going to get funded. I mentioned that the Treasure Valley Water Users Sustainability Study, we're in phase 1, which is data collection. Phase 2 is modeling. What we're talking about right here is basically phase 3. And this will feed right into phase 3 as some options. So we're looking at some gravel pits that are near the Boise River that aren't too far from the Boise River that will be fairly inexpensive on the piping to get water to it. We've done our research as well on this, and there's been lots of studies since 2011 from the Water Resource Board and others about how to store and capture floodwater, but the cheapest alternative was the $100 million pipeline. So for example, taking water from Parma and piping it back upstream to Caldwell, it's too expensive for any of us to do. So these little incremental changes will add up to a lot if we're able to come up with a good plan for it, and will save us. It won't cost us $100 million. It'll be much, much less than that. Okay, so that's some of the conservation projects. I think most of you are aware of the Kartra wetland, but I wanted to just tie it in, how it fits in with water rights and all of this, because like I said, every time that you do some sort of water project, it has some downstream impact somewhere else. And so our Kartra wetland project, we're glad to have the funding from the EPA, DEQ, looking at some private partnerships there. That's mainly a water quality project, so taking toxins out of the water. Phosphorus, we're looking at PFAS. But you're going to take that water out of Indian Creek and put it into a wetland, you're going to get evaporation. So it's about 0.1% of the total flow. It doesn't seem like a lot when you say it that way, but if you add it up on an entire 4-month period, you're looking at maybe 1,500 to 2,000 acre feet. That's enough that an irrigation district downstream is going to notice that. So on this particular project, we already have a mitigation in mind, which is great. And we've been engaging the irrigation districts because when we do this project, we have to get a non-conceptive water right from the Water Resource Board. And then that's subject to a protest from anybody that wants to protest it. So we're trying to avoid that by coming up with some solutions so they don't have to protest it. And our solution on this one is that Yeah, we'll be losing some water through evaporation, but for decades, we've been at a wastewater plant, been pumping groundwater out of underneath the wastewater plant, putting it back into the top of the wastewater stream and treating it. And it would end up in Phillips Canal, actually, in this current scenario. But what we've been doing is 18 months of testing of the water quality between the Indian Creek and the groundwater that we're pumping. And we proved to the DEQ it's basically the same water body. We kind of already knew that, but we did all the testing. And then we have all the hydraulic connections from the studies from the Water Resource Board, like I said, from 2011, and we showed that groundwater actually ends up in a drain that's the same as the drain water. So it doesn't make sense for us to spend a bunch of money on treating groundwater we're pumping out of from underneath a wastewater plant and treat it. Why not just put that water directly into Indian Creek? So that actually is going to save Nampa a lot of money too, because that's 1 million gallons a day we just gained in capacity that we didn't have to build anything for, which is a pretty big deal. And then what that does is for the irrigation districts, that gives them the mitigation that they need, that they won't protest us, because now they're getting the water that was going in the Phillips Canal back into the Indian Creek. So it's things like that we need to think about and make sure that these types of projects, we can move them forward and all get along in the valley. Okay, I think we already talked about that one. So just in closing, so for long time, over 100 years, we haven't had any problem with having enough drain flow coming downstream in Caldwell to divert back out in the Boise River. So it's 100 years, we've been fine, but now we're starting to see declining drain flows. So I guess I didn't really hit too much on why that is. I should do that. It's a combination of several things. So as you urbanize, you take a farm, which used to have flood irrigation, and that flood irrigation would return back into a drain. You turn that to a subdivision, they use sprinklers, so you lose that return flow. So you've got that dynamic. And then you've got the urbanization where you've got developers coming in and tiling laterals and canals and drains inside their subdivisions because they want to have more space to develop up to that. And so you lose all that surface seepage I was talking about that gets that shallow groundwater built up. So urbanization is part of it, but it's not all of it. The other part is the irrigation districts are realizing just how valuable the surface water is, and they're recycling the water out of the drain before it leaves their district. And so between those two things, that's what's happening to the drains. Regardless of all what happens, it's an issue that we need to deal with, and it's a sign to us that there's issues coming, and that's just the tip of the iceberg. So we need to be thinking proactively on what we do with our surface water. So that's why we're working on these projects, and why we think it's important, and we want to try to help out, make a difference in the region. And we can do this if we all work together. Like I said, we got some good partners so far. We've got the Treasure Valley Water Purveyors, that's one of Jeff operations team. All of us water operators in the valley get together about once a month and talk about issues. So we can bring that up there. And then we got our Water Conservation Task Force. We got the Ada County Water Summit. They put that together, it happens in Ada County, but like I said, it's all one aquifer. So we're talking about regional projects. We bring this stuff up there. We have the Lower Boise Water Council, which they're more about water quality, but like I said, they realize as well that every water quality project has some sort of conservation effect as well. And then, of course, the Treasure Valley Water Users Association. So I think if we be proactive and we get ahead of this and use some science and data, we can come up with some good solutions. And I'm looking forward to some more information from the Treasure Valley Water Sustainability Project. And I'll be glad to give you more updates as we know more information. But yeah, happy to answer any questions you have at this time about anything water.
Tom, this was really, really good. Council, we have about 5 minutes. for questions. Councilman Haverfield.
Okay, then I won't ask all the questions that I wrote down, but the one question I was going to ask, as far as the Cat Creek Reservoir that's planned, what's the timeline for it? And is it more for potable water, or is it meant to be a surface water as well?
Yeah, Mayor, Council Haverfield. So the Cat Creek Summit is still in permitting. It's not, I don't have a construction date on that yet. They're trying to get to environmental and the FERC, energy license, and the water rights. So there's a lot there. I don't know how long it's going to take them to get through it, but they're still not there yet. But that particular project, to answer your second question, it's going to feed water into the Anderson Ranch and be another source of storage, which will end up as either irrigation water. It could be used as potable water. Someday, if Nampa ever wanted to put a straw in the Boise River, we could turn it to potable water, and that's a totally viable thing to do. Veolia, which is Boise's system, they actually have a water treatment plant in the Boise River, kind of just downstream that geothermal area. So that they've got one already that they do treat about 35% of their total water is coming out of the Boise River. Micron is another big user of the Boise River. They're using it for cooling, but it has multiple uses.
So my follow-up then, is the Boise and the Snake River the only two natural rivers that feed into Nampa with these offshoot canals and diversion reservoirs like Lake Lowell? Or is there another source? I know that you talked about the artesian or the geothermal. Besides that, is there any other sources besides those two river flows?
Yeah, Mayor, Council Haverfield. So the Boise River is our main source. You mentioned the Snake. We can't really use the Snake River unless we put a pipe in it, that's one of those alternatives I was telling you about from the Water Resource Board study. Hundreds of millions of dollars to put pipelines in. So the Nampa, or the Mountain Home Air Force Base, they're looking at putting a pipeline in the Snake River because they have no other options. And that's like a almost $150 million project to get a pipeline up there and do all the treatment. So our main source at this point is the Boise. Another alternative that I saw was to pull water out of the Payette, but it's the same thing. It's bringing a pipe over the top of the ridge and back into our drainage.
Does that feed the Cat Creek Summit, is the Payette?
Cat Creek Summit is all the Boise River drainage.
So we're pretty much dependent on the Boise River?
Yes.
Yes, Councilman Griffins.
Thank you. I had a whole handful, but I'll save it to two. So first off, with the Zamzows partnership that we have, what distribution are they doing on water conservation efforts, whether it be for their lawn care program and watering times, that we could coordinate with them via the newsletter or any other means to help get that message out? Is that something that we've done yet or that we can look into? Because I think it's mass spread.
I think I'm going to let Amy answer that. She's been talking very closely with Josh Zamzows.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. So from my recollection, it was 2 years in a row we held community outreach events. And so the first year, as Tom referenced, we had an amazing response from the community. Over 300 people attended at the Civic Center. The second year that we held that event, not as many came, maybe 15 or so. So in terms of ongoing outreach, this year we haven't held an event like that. They do encourage people, I think, to water wisely, so we have done things in the past, but we haven't, to my knowledge, done anything specifically this year, but we always can.
You know, I was just thinking about it as you were talking. We need to go ahead through our communication channels, all of them, is to send a link to our WaterWise booklet that we put together, just as a reminder. It's an ongoing process. Mm-hmm. I have to say, when we began, I asked Tom if he could set up this drought task force, having no idea where he would take it. Far beyond what I would have even envisioned is what he accomplished. And then it turning into what it is today, which is a long-term water conservation. I am extremely thrilled to see all the work that's been put into this because it's excellent. And actually taking the lead for the Treasure Valley, we have spoken with the Treasure Valley Partnership with other mayors. There's such a different delivery system between the different municipalities, but the message and Tom and Jeff, they're doing such a phenomenal job communicating with the other municipalities across the Treasure Valley, working with the public works systems. But we have a different delivery system. We have a greater opportunity to influence the outcome than the other municipalities do. It is concerning that, that Boise pulls their surface application water out of the drinking aquifer. I believe, is that a correct statement? Out of our deep wells.
Mayor, so they've got roughly 60% of their water comes from the ground and 40% from the Boise River, and they treat it from there. So it's not terrible, but we need to be careful about putting more straws for irrigation in the deep drinking water. And one thing I do want to mention, so NAMPA is working on leading the charge for the valley on surface water and conservation and how to manage that. City of Boise is doing a good job on the drinking water side. They're building if you may have seen in the paper, they're building a plant over by Micron to treat their recycled water and treat the PFAS and inject it back down into the groundwater. So those types of projects that they're doing are going to help out on the top end, which actually helps all of us, because that water ends up down here. Everything flows this way. So
it's a collaborative effort, and you're right, we need to continue to educate. So I think this is a good time of year to have Amy push it out through all of our different channels.
And I just think, just as always, it's just keeping it simple and pointed. These are our 3 recommended times. Set your water meter for these times of water. Because I know for when I set up my system, you go and you look, what's the best time? Because I had mentioned to you while I was campaigning, what is this? And we talked about the Kentucky bluegrass and all the things. And he said, oh, set it at 2 to 4 or whatever ends up being for the deep sea. I think just keeping it simple helps anybody who's reading a newsletter. Oh, I didn't even think about that. I can make a quick change. This is a deep dive, but the little simple things could help. And I have one quick other one, if I may, Mayor. In regard to the open space and the code change, would that have any other recreational value other than walking paths? Could we add fish into these little local ponds and have fishing? I just would hate to take open space that we would hope to have a very active scene, whether it be for pickleball or for a playground or anything that these communities have. I think a pond's a great idea if we can have a recreational side of it. That'll have a benefit to the homeowners.
So Mayor, Councilman Griffin, so Fish and Game has been a good partner with us. I'm sure if it was a big enough facility, they'd be interested. I know that they've been talking to us about building some sort of pond on Lakeview Park, which is actually right next to Mason Creek. So we're looking at that, and they would like to turn that to a fishery, so I don't see why we couldn't do it other places. And we've got Wilson Ponds right here where they generate their own fish, so we've got everything that we need to make a good program for that.
Mayor, just a couple quick, really fast for Tom. On page 19, we saw a huge spike in domestic water for 2022. Can you tell us why that spike is so high? And then also, to kind of compound on Councilman Griffin's question, since we have planning and zoning here as well, what would that look like for us to put conditions on a project if you're wanting us to explore the idea of putting in ponds to utilize or in place of green space? What does that look like? How would we include that in a condition?
Could I make just a quick comment? Rodney, you're probably going to say it. I would be concerned about putting it as a condition, because I think what we need to do is, and Tom, this will be coming from your group, we need to identify where the ponds would be beneficial. Because if after a project is fully developed, we come back in a condition and say, oh, whoops, you got to put this in, it would be extremely costly and difficult, and it may not even create the benefit we need. What we need to do early on is planning and zoning, working with Public Works, identify the areas that it would be beneficial, because it wouldn't be beneficial in every area. And so we could be adding cost and requirements after the fact that maybe don't give us the greatest benefit. So my recommendation is that we work with our Public Works Department, identify the areas that the pond would be beneficial, and it would come in our code early on, but it would be in reference to the work that's already been done. It wouldn't come from here as a condition. That would, and Rodney, would you say something different?
No, I think you've highlighted the issue really well. We need to locate them where they make sense the most. So identifying those up front is really good. The other thing is, once we've identified those locations, our code currently, as has been pointed out this morning, allows those to be a part of qualified open space if they have certain amenities, including the pathway, benches, things like that around them. I would just say to Councilman Griffin's comment that we also can think about these in their demographics. Like, the different type of demographics require different type of amenities. And if it's truly if a project is designed for single family, young families, then maybe that's not the appropriate one, right? Or we do something like fish in that pond to kind of incentivize kids fishing or something. But I don't think that a playground in every open space is the solution here. We need to think holistically about the different demographics that we're trying to build housing for.
Mayor, can I just ask then, if there is an area that it does make sense to have a pond, can you guys include that in our packet so that we will know that that is something that we should explore?
Yeah, so that's a great idea. I think what we'll probably rely on, and we'll work with Public Works on, is to look at that when they make comments back to every project that we give to them for comments for. So then they can look at that in their analysis and put that in their recommendations.
Thank you, Rodney and Tom. Thanks.
Those are really good questions, Councilman Jingula. The one thing that we might ask is that staff would be having those discussions before it ever gets here. Because again, I feel like if we're doing that from the bench, it probably would be concerning. It would need to be happening in the discussion between Public Works, Planning and Zoning. You know the areas. When you guys are having those initial discussions, you could have those discussions at that time and then provide the report.
Yeah, agreed. I think it makes sense for us to identify those locations early on. We can put that in the map. We can put in even in the comprehensive plan, and that way even the developers know when they start looking at this area, oh, they're wanting this kind of pond, and they can work that into their plan even before it gets before planning and zoning at all, or even an application. So I think we can handle this pretty easily.
Awesome. Great idea. Thank you.
So, Mayor, Council Jangula, so you asked about the peak, and I think you're talking about this graph here on the far upper. So, so yes, like I mentioned, we were trying to optimize our system, so that was in 2022. So you can see in 2023, we brought it back down.
Was that a drought? Was that the drought when we turned the water off early?
I don't remember what year it was. Let's see. I think this was just 2022 is when we just started talking about it, I believe, yes. And so this is a locust well that well over by Lake Lowell that I was mentioned. We're using a little bit too much for irrigation, so we figured out how to use some more surface irrigation and bring it back down the next year.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah.
We do need to wrap because we're into the next section. So any other questions? Tom, this was really good. Thank you, Jeff. You guys are doing an outstanding job. Thank you for being the leaders in this topic in the Treasure Valley and actually in the state. You guys are doing great work. I'm so proud of you, and thank you so much. Great job. Thank you. Thank you. Doug, thank you. I'm looking forward to this presentation.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor and Council. So Doug Critchfield, Principal Planner in Planning Development. We have this morning with us Emily Mueller and Mark Bottles from Bottles. And they are going to share with you some of their perspective on master plan communities. And we thought that would be helpful for you to see that from the developer side and what that means in terms of how policies affect what happens on the development side and what they're looking at when we talk about master plan communities. So Emily has graciously offered to come up here and have a discussion with you, and then I'll be following up with the policy issues that we have in our current code, and also discussing some cluster development, what that looks like in our code as well. So.
Thank you. And Emily, before you even start, first of all, thank you so much for being here. I have a question for you. Would you like us to hold questions till the end, or if there's a question that comes up from council as you're presenting, would you prefer us to address it while we're in that section, or how would you like to?
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, thank you, Mayor. Maybe I'll go through some of the slides first, because that might answer some of the questions, and then Mark is going to come up and share some thoughts as well. And then maybe when Mark is up, I can come back up and we can answer questions, and then turn it back over to staff, if that works.
That's great. So we'll just write our questions down and hold them till the end. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, council members and commission members who are here. As Doug said, I'm Emily Mueller. I work with Mark Bottles and John Bottles, and our team is the Idaho Holdings, and we've done some, development around the Valley, and are just so excited about master plan communities. And so we've been talking with staff for about the last 6 months about these, and it's my understanding that a kind of a pure master plan community hasn't come into Nampa yet. It's always been accompanied by another preliminary plat application, so there hasn't been just a master plan community application. So we wanted to come and share our thoughts about the benefits of those, and then what the application actually looks like, what you could expect to see when it's not accompanied by a plat. So with that, we are here to talk about what master plan communities are, and you're going to hear me say a couple times, master plan communities are beautiful, complete, integrated communities that help both the public and the private sectors plan for future growth. So I loved that water conservation talking about planning and how do we both plan? How do the private sector and the public sector plan? Let's see here. Where do I point this? Great.
Okay, I think what I'll do is just let me know when you need a slide.
All right, awesome. So there are master plan communities all around the Treasure Valley, and here's just a couple images of them. When Doug can move to the next one. Great. There are master plan communities all around the valley. Harris Ranch out in East Boise, Hidden Springs, Dry Creek Ranch are just some of them. Paramount is also another great master plan community in Meridian that are large land uses. So again, these are just great examples of them. So how do we get to these? And it really starts with a large plan, a large master plan. So Doug, if you want to go to the next one. And it's really a bubble plan. And I'll talk a little bit more about bubble plans, how they come in with the application. But the bubble plan would include different types of residential densities, strategically placed, commercial. So we've got commercial highlighted in red here, multifamily in brown, and then different densities of residential. So if you want to go to the next one, Doug. It starts with planning where commercial will go. There can be commercial integrated throughout the community based on the type of commercial user. We're working on another master plan in another city currently, and we already have, even though sewer is years away, we already have large commercial tenants that want to buy ground now because they know, looking around the community, here's how many rooftops there are going to be, and here's the phasing of when this will take place. So that speaks to the private sector being able to plan, and as the development team that we would work with, being able to get the best tenants in there, who we can say, hey, this spot is designated for you. Here are the residential units that are going to support that. So the next slide highlights then, again, where you could put in multifamily, strategically placed, again, throughout the community. And the next slide, again, is just showing some, highlighting where different density pockets could be throughout the community. And this is really important to have those different densities because it allows people to age in place, age in the community, go through different housing communities. My husband and I live in a house right now that we love, that I can probably touch my neighbor's house. The houses are put together, and then there's other houses in the future if we grow our family to have a bigger house if we wanted, but we love the ability to age in place, keep kids in the same schools, and be in the same community. I'll point out also, if you've been to Harris Ranch, there are it's a beautiful community, and some of the lots are really small. It allows you to centralize open space, so to put those amenities in places where the community can use them, and that's really a market and a demographic that maybe Mark can speak to later as well, that people are enjoying more centralized amenities, and not everyone wants the same large yard. So it enables us, but then again, in a master plan, it allows for those same types of lots. So to age in place, to have different housing types, to create a complete community. Okay, Doug, if you want to go to the next one. So again, here's the photo of the master plan where you have the bubble, and then if you click the next slide, has all of the elements to it. So this kind of brings it to life. Again, when we were talking about those other plans, brings it to life with all the different types of uses available. All right, Doug, if you want to go to the next one. So what are the benefits of a master plan community? As I said, it allows the public and the private sector to plan for future growth. The public sector can plan for utilities, can plan for water conservation. It looks at a much bigger plan, so you're not putting something on a 20-acre subdivision or a 30-acre subdivision, but we could be looking at a 300-acre plan. And again, it's not a one-time plat, but it's a future growth plan. And then again, the great thing about NAMPA's code for master plan communities is that it requires a cohesive design, some theme that makes you feel like you're a part of a community and makes you proud to be a part of that community. So it's not just, I'm from this 15-acre subdivision, but I'm from this complete, beautiful community. Again, what I discussed earlier, strategic organization of amenities and open space and commercial uses, so next to commercial uses, creating more centralized community spaces. Finally, again, as I'll talk a little bit later, the benefits is that it requires 15% open space of the total gross acreage of the plan. So that includes commercial uses, that includes everything. So you're getting some enhanced open space requirements, and there's a really specific list of what types of enhanced amenities are required. So those are agreed to upfront for the whole plan, and allows you, as we were talking about, what amenities go with better communities, allows you to kind of plan that out. Okay, Doug, if you want to go to the next slide. So then the next topic here is, what does a master plan application actually look like? And I pulled 4 of the main portions of Nampa City Code that I think would be included in an application that you would look at. So the first is a bubble diagram. It's not a plat with individual lots laid out. It's a bubble diagram showing where the uses would be and what the general densities would be. So then we've got on the right corner up there, the proposed densities and housing types, and it would include elevation renderings. And then additionally, it would include all of the type, size, and location of the open space amenities. And then fourth, how do we make sure that this plan continues for the next, if this takes 20 years to develop, 30 years to develop, is through a development agreement that makes sure that the private sector plans and develops it as approved. So that development agreement is really important to vest those three other items that we talked about. So we'll click through these quickly. The conceptual plan, again, it's a bubble diagram. It shows land uses, proposed densities, roadway network throughout the plan. And it's really high level. Next would be landscape and amenities concepts. So you would show where the landscape elements are, where the amenities are, and all of this would be included in the development agreement. And this helps plan, amenities next to commercial spaces. One thing that we love and we've talked with staff about also are, more centralized amenities with commercial spaces. So on the right-hand corner there, you can kind of see a splash pad and a little band shell, and that would serve both the residential as a residential amenity and then next to the commercial section. So it really enables you to plan out those amenities where they would go. Third, again, is the conceptual renderings. So it have conceptual renderings of the different home types, residential products, and even commercial products, and making sure that it's one cohesive design. And then again, it's all tied together in a development agreement. So all of this would vest and would bind the private sector to develop this way, which enables, again, the public utilities to, and all of the different public uses to plan around this area. And so again, I'll have Mark come up and kind of share some other thoughts before we open it up for discussion. But again, this is a long-term plan. It's not just a one-time plat, and it allows us to plan for that future growth that we're really excited about. So with that, I will let Mark come up and share some thoughts too.
Morning.
Good morning, Mayor and council members. You guys, I will give you this, you're up and at it early. So I know you have a lot going on with the city with rodeo and things, but I don't know that I can say much more, to be honest with you. Emily, you did such a great job. I've just, as you know, I've been in the community for 30 some years and have worked in projects all over Surprise Valley and Watch Terrace Ranch and Meadow Creek, which is down in Garden City. That they just, when you look at a large-scale community, I think the thing that's so important that I see is I've had friends that have moved into a neighborhood and bought a house that's affordable. And I've seen them be able to turn around and buy into another phase that it's a step-up home. They go from no kids to 2 kids. And they can actually stay, I mean, I have friends that are still in the same communities, literally, it's 20 years later. And, you know, those communities are nice. You know, they continue to grow up. The pathway systems to them, the connectivity, they have central gathering places. And I think that's so important. I think what we're excited about to do is when you're, it's hard to do that on a 20-acre parcel, a 40-acre parcel, to come in and do that, even an 80-acre parcel. But when you're able to bring in a large piece, and be able to master plan it with a bubble plan, you know what you're going to get. What gets exciting is those retailers, and I've had you all ask me at times, hey, how do we get these retailers? When they see those master plan communities coming in, they jump in and say right away, whether it's the Albertsons or the Fred Meyers, they're like, hey, we want to build a really nice store here. This is perfect. And they're willing to take risks because they realize the money and the effort that goes into these big master plan communities. And you get everything from your local dentist office and, you know, those kind of things, chiropractic office and things. And so what's nice is that these take years to build out. It takes a lot of centralized planning. And so we're just excited about your comp plan and what your staff has worked on for the years. And we're just excited about what we see here. And we've spent a lot of time traveling into other markets really to understand even the latest and greatest what people are doing for communities. And that, again, the beautiful thing is not just being able to scale up, but in a lot of these communities, you see people moving in, they've got grandparents, they've got extended family. To be able to stay in that same community is such a huge thing. Honestly, I think that's some degree what we miss sometimes in our culture right now, we get into just one community here and that's it. And if we can do that, I think this integration of different pricing points, different product types in an area is important. And as we grow, we need that more. So anyway, thank you so much for your time.
Mayor,
Wonderful, Mayor.
unless you have a question first, go ahead.
Go ahead.
Okay, Mark, quick question regarding just the plan and the full aspect. And I lived in Hidden Springs until 4th grade, so I went to Hidden Springs when it was a charter school and then became an elementary school. So I understand the connectivity side of it and having all the access. For what you're proposing, is there opportunities even within Nampa where we could have schools integrated within these plans rather than plats and having that as future thinking as well? And also, if you have not yet, you should trademark to age in place. I think that's a great slogan.
Yeah.
Because it makes sense for everybody.
Great, thank you, Mayor and Councilman Griffin. Yes, so a part of, I think, really any plan, but what becomes even more important with master plans when you're looking at a bigger acreage is to go and meet with the schools and say, what do you need? Sometimes schools will say, hey, we already have enough land, or we have enough of that, but I think it is definitely a process to go and would be required to go meet with the different school districts and ask what is needed here, and whether that's land or something different. But that's, I think that, yeah, the school districts would know what they need for a specific area. And again, master plans help them plan that out, so, yeah.
Other questions? Councilman Haverfield.
Mark, you know you don't need to sell me on the concept. Mayor, like I mentioned to you yesterday, we're fortunate to be currently working at Avamore, which is truly a master plan community. Actually, while I was sitting here, I just got notice of a property that just was purchased in the downtown second core area that we're working on in Howell Station there, that I just got the contract to start the work on the main building on Monday night. And so there's no pressure, but they've already got one of the units sold, which again is an anchor for the downtown. So commercial development there as they're widening Highway 55. There's a lot happening at Avamore, but we worked in Harris Ranch. We worked in pretty much, I think River Run with Peter O'Neill was the beginning of Harris Ranch back on the river, which was a larger lot development with river frontage and intertwining of smaller creeks throughout the development. It was, incredible development to be a part of that just below Warm Springs. So we can look at so many good ideas that are already present in the valley for development. Even my own daughter and son-in-law, on their property, they put in that pond that, when we're talking about ponds, I know what they've gone through as far as being able to surface treat the bottom of it to keep the water from getting back into the ground, and then adding the fish, and then the environment that it creates with, even they saw an eagle take out one of the fish in their pond the other day. So there's a lot that can happen that I think makes so much sense here, and being an arid location, this just helps to create more emphasis on the open green space to qualify, and then working with our Public Works Department. I think it'd be fantastic. One of the things that, as far as at Avamore, they've got a school under construction right now. It's a charter school, so it's not dependent on any school district's funding or bonding. It's a private entity funded that is coming in to build that school, and then they'll add a grade level each year for the next 5 years to get it to a high school level. So anyway, great concept. Love to be a part of it and have you do that here in Nampa.
Mayor?
Yes.
Emily and Mark, thank you so much. This is awesome. This sings to my heart so much. I very often will say that our growth sometimes feels as though we're forcing people out of our community, and it's the same concept of what you just said, is how you are in a space where you can age in place. And oftentimes if we have so much of just one type of home, and one size and things like that, it just doesn't allow people to change and grow and stay in their community. And so I love this idea because it does allow for that, so it's fantastic. And a lot of times we talk about stewardship, we talk about it every day. And this really does help us be good stewards of the land, because it makes us look at it holistically and plan accordingly. Like we just talked about the water and how that's so important, and where we can actually plan a whole community that allows us to develop this land and be good stewards over it. You know, once an acre is developed, it's developed forever. And so we only have so many acres to do that. So this just allows us to really look at it and make really good decisions on our land. So thank you.
Thank you for the presentation. I think as staff knows, I think since day one in office, I think they got tired of me talking about master plan communities and referencing certain ones, and I am a huge proponent. So I love the fact we need the right tool, right? So that when the master plan community comes in, and I appreciate the education, so that we're all familiar with it, we understand it, the vision is absolutely right. Our greatest challenge has been where people own a pocket. They have 10 acres, 20 acres, maybe 40. It's not big enough to master plan. And so I appreciate the vision, because it takes the vision to try to get everybody to work together to bring it in. And so that is the private sector. And then if we can support that from the public sector, I really appreciate it, because it's where we need to go. So thank you so much for the vision. Thank you for giving a visual representation of what it can be. And I like the clarification of the bubbles versus the plats. I think that's absolutely right. And also the reminder of how long it takes. It takes a very long time. I think so many times, unless you're in development, you don't understand that this is a long end game. The other thing is, and I think it's important for us at this bench to understand, that when a developer comes, many times we've put a hold for some little reason on a development, and sometimes just to get to where they're standing there, like you guys, and you guys aren't presenting anything in particular, and I'm not referencing you as developers, I'm referencing developers in general, that it's cost them tens of thousands of dollars to hundreds of thousands of dollars just to get before us, and then we go, oh, no, I think we should reduce this by so many units or do that, and we're playing with their plan, and I'm going to say playing with it, and it's at a huge, huge cost. So the better job we can do, and Doug, you've done a really good job, Rodney, in our land use planning, that we can be very clear so that our developers understand what we're looking for, and then we adhere to the plan. And understanding too, I think sometimes we forget that planning and zoning, we have codes in place, so we don't have to redesign. Like, we don't have to redesign it because they're doing their job right before it comes. And so I feel like we've got a good plan in place, but I think it's just the reminder of where we need to be here versus what staff is doing, and making sure that we have our plan and that we understand our plan. So that when a developer is out building this master plan community, or even a smaller one, that they've already had the communication, but then we need the familiarization from the bench of what that plan is to make sure we adhere to our plan. Because we've had some very awkward moments. I'm saying this with you guys standing there during your time, but it's kind of awkward for you as a developer to make comment on that, but I would welcome your comment. One of the things I've just learned is that we can be really problematic up here, not intentionally, but it can be. So I love the way you've brought this plan forward. Any comments, thoughts?
Yeah, Mayor and Council, thank you for that and just the time to present. But yeah, when you're doing a larger project like this, and let's just say it's hundreds of acres, 200, 300, 400 acres, because to do it, it's a lot of money to assemble that much ground. And what's beautiful about it, I think the biggest concern is having enough time to present and go through it, because if I'm presenting a 20-acre project or a 15 or 40, I understand time limits in that. But when you're presenting something that's big and it's a long-term vision, and it's going to affect the adjacent properties next to it, because it's easy then to say, hey, we want to continue with this theme in these neighboring parcels. I mean, it really creates such a beautiful area. I mean, I started my career about 35 years ago in East Boise, where you're talking about. I worked for Pete O'Neill. And it was just the ponds, and it just continued on. So as different projects progressed, it got neater, in my opinion, neater. And when you go out there, it does flow. And but it's a lot of risk when you're assembling ground like that. And so to have the time to present and even just talk through that, because I mean, you guys have done a great job. You truly have. And, North Nampa, Northeast Nampa right now, there's so many good opportunities. And so we're excited about it, and we're excited about the future and what's ahead of us.
Thank you, Mayor, and just I'll make one comment to that too. Yeah, your staff is incredible. So one thing I will say with the development agreement, in addition to having all of the items that we discussed, the bubble plan, the landscape plan, and the renderings, the development agreement also says you will develop to code. So it will still come through for a preliminary plat later, but I think the beautiful thing is that as a council, you can have a long-term, bigger vision and not worry about the tiny, minute things that sometimes jump out at a plat and take up a lot of discussion. So I think it frees everyone up to see that long-term vision and then rely on the code and the staff on the little things. So again, it frees up for the long-term planning and to have the wonderful staff that you do. So.
I love having the concept design in there because it does give us an idea of what it's going to look like and what you're going to be designing to. The fact that that's all part of the development agreement. And then, as you said, leaving the smaller stuff. So, Council, do we have any other questions? Because we may have more comment from staff. Any other questions for the Bottles team here? Emily,
Mayor,
Mark?
I've got one really
Yes.
fast question. Having looked at other city codes in master plans, is our code up to par as far as what you guys are presenting here, what we need, or are there some changes you would recommend us make to get us to this place?
Mayor and Councilmember Jangula, I think that your code is great. I think one thing about, especially as we're designing these communities and putting and agreeing up front to the heightened amenities, it also, I think one great thing about your code is that it gives a list of amenities that you need to include, but then it also says, additional amenities that the council may approve or recommend. So it also gives some latitude for different specific areas. It's not one size fits all. So we think that the code is great. Yeah.
Thank you so much. Really, really. Are there any other questions for them? Anything else you'd like to share?
We are good.
Good, thank you.
I appreciate the dialogue.
Yeah.
It's helpful because it isn't very often that we get to have a dialogue about where we need to go, how we need to go there. I love what you've put together. Thank you so much. Thank you for helping us move this forward.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. So Doug and Rodney, would you like to share some comments and thoughts about where we go? Maybe you're probably 2 steps ahead of me right there.
Thank you, Mayor. We just wanted to mention that we really appreciate Mark and Emily for being here this morning, working with us. They've done a lot behind the scenes to help us with several issues with trying to develop code and how this influences the development community, and they've been terrific. So I just wanted to mention a few things about our code and how it supports master plan communities. I'm not going to go into a lot of detail here, but we do mention specifically the types of land use. It's mostly in the comprehensive plan, but we talk about the types of land uses that could occur in these. This is something that we'll be bringing back to you as we do the next round of updates for the comprehensive plan, meaning the plan as a whole. And so if there are things that you would like to discuss in this area, we'll have opportunities to discuss it. But largely, the types of uses support the community around it, as Emily had mentioned earlier. The design principles really emphasize a strong sense of place. That's an element, what we call a genus loci, or a sense of place, is something that's emphasized throughout design communities throughout the world. And so if we can continue to build on that idea with these master plan communities and emphasize what the community as a whole wants to be, we can do that in these master plan communities by developing that sense of place. Generally, the street profiles, the architecture, the landscaping, all of those things need to work together in these types of communities. Our code specifically talks about the size of these communities. Generally, they're not smaller than 40 acres, although we think that there could be some provisions for a smaller type of master plan community. That's something we would need to discuss. Generally, it includes multiple zones within those communities, depending on the type of construction. The code allows for an increase in density beyond what the zoning chapters allow, and also reduce lot size, reduced by 20%. The intent there is to get some more density in these types of developments around these core areas, and so that we reduce the amount of traffic and the other impacts that come with these types of developments. And this is something that's been in the comprehensive plan since 2020. The qualified open space, I'm not going to go through all of this, but I just wanted to mention something that Tom had mentioned earlier about these ponds. The number one requested element in recreational element are walking paths. And this is, that's been confirmed by the National Recreation Parks Association. By far, that's the most popular element. But we also recognize the need for other elements, as Council Member Griffin had mentioned, for different types of user groups in these areas. A large gathering area is really important in these master plan communities. That's something that we see again across the country as we've looked at several of these communities. That element helps define the space, and Councilmember Haverfield was talking about. It also opens up opportunities for other uses such as school sites and other uses in these areas where there's that sense of place. And those things could look something like this, enhanced playgrounds or elements within park systems that enhance the area and again, just give it a sense of place. So on our future land use map, we're now starting to do specific area plans. And within those specific area plans, we're starting to identify, as we talk to landowners, about where these master plan communities could go. And we already have one kind of in process. We have two others that we're looking at right now that will be coming before you here. And they work hand in hand with the specific area plans. So this has been a really positive process to go through these and really understand what the landowners and the development community want to do in these areas. And to try and build compatibility as much as we can in that process. And so I do have some density allowances. I could, if there's any questions about density and what those look like, I could show those to you, but I'm going to move through this part. I just wanted to show you a little bit. This is some research that we've done about what's required in terms of density to get certain types of businesses to come in. As Mark and Emily had talked about, these businesses are looking for certainty. They're looking for opportunities such as these master plan communities. But an example would be to get a full-service grocery store, we need to have about 7.8 dwelling units per acre. That's a pretty high density. And that's, again, these are national averages. To bring in a Home Depot, they need about 7.8 dwelling units per acre. A Target needs 2.8 dwelling units per acre. A Costco needs 4 dwelling units per acre. So these different stores are looking for these densities within a certain radius of their potential location. And so that's the reason why we're suggesting that the densities can increase in these centralized areas so that we can bring in some of these other interests in the area. Currently, the population in Nampa, according to the 2023 census, I don't have 24 census estimates yet, but we're at 114 as of July 23. It's more like 119 now is what Compass is telling us in terms of population. So our density right now is about 4.9 dwelling units per acre. So these master plan communities will help increase that density in specific areas that's in a well-designed neighborhood with a specific focus so that we can bring in some of these other amenities, particularly grocery stores that we need in the area. The other benefit for density is that it helps with land value when you look at an area. So as we increase the density, the amount of tax contribution increases dramatically. And this chart really references different lot sizes. So if we have larger lots, the tax contribution is fairly low, but as we increase the lot sizes, it increases pretty dramatically. Same thing occurs when we talk about the value of an acre of development. The value increases, obviously, as we add more lots to that acreage. So there's some benefits to gaining density financially as well for the city. So I just wanted a couple minutes to, there were some questions in the last council meeting about cottage cluster development. I wanted to show you some examples of what that means for us. And there are two types of cottage cluster developments that we've identified as a community in the comprehensive plan and in the code. The first is a master plan community, or excuse me, a cottage cluster development that would be on a smaller lot, perhaps an infill type of development. And we've got some very specific code about what these need to look like because they're so dense and they're so tightly compact in these areas. And the impacts to the adjacent neighborhoods is important when we talk about developing this type of cluster development. And this is a unique type of living. Not everybody would like to live in this type of setting. But we recognize, and we've had some interest in this type of development. We've got that identified in code as to the lot size, what can occur on these sites, what the landscaping and the layout should be. This is a development in Garden City. We have some examples around the area. This is Adams Street Cottages in Garden City. Typically, these are a small number of units, and there's parking. Generally, we require 2.5 parking spaces per unit. The parking spaces for the residential units are to be covered, or they can be in garages. And so we have some real specific code as to how these can develop. This is a development in California that I frequented often when I lived out there. And from aerial view, it looks very dense, but as you get down into the property, there's lots of open space built into this type of development. And that's a cottage cluster development. These are cottage units on these. They can have a clubhouse or a large green space on the interior. They can have elements that would be desirable for the residents in the area, large front porches, landscaping, and those types of things. So the configuration is different. They have to access their homes by parking generally on the exterior in some common lot, and then they walk to their homes. That's typical of most of these types of developments. But the layout is fairly similar when you look at these types of cottage cluster units. And the amenities and the treatments on the architecture, it's not any less, it doesn't cost any less to build these units per square foot, but they're smaller units. And so that's how the cost is lower. And then this is some of the code that supports it, and you can see that we've identified minimum setbacks and layouts of large landscape buffers and those types of things in terms of the heights of the structures, even the setbacks of the second stories on these units. And then there's a second type of cluster development. I think the council member Bills was referring to this on the last council meeting. These are larger lot areas. So I just picked out a few that I found here. These larger lot cluster units emphasize large areas of open space that can be integrated into the development or large contiguous areas on the outside. This one is 115 acres, has 159 units, and 56% of it is in open space. Most of this open space, there's different ways that you can treat it. You can, the open space could be treated as some agricultural use out there that would be low impact. It could be a natural area that's just left as natural area. Or areas could be treated. But the intent is to cluster the housing such that this open space is available. This is another type of development. This one is 183 acres, 363 units, and 54% in open space. These types of developments are really reserved for the areas that we call the very low density residential zones or zoning designations on the map. And the reason being is that those natural areas along the Boise River and Lake Lowell really do need to have open space areas to allow wildlife to move through, to pick up the character of the area in these types of developments. And so we don't have as much code about these types of developments, and we think that that's an area where we can improve and bring things to you about how these developments could work. The density is no more than 2.5 dwelling units per acre, so it's a fairly low density. But the layout and all of that is really important in these types of developments, and we need more code and information to bring to you.
Doug, thank you for bringing that home a little bit, because we have some areas that are down by Lake Lowell specifically, that are near the Deer Flat Refuge area that is butting up to ag ground. And so the discussion with the county, and I tell you, our team has done a phenomenal job working with Canyon County to try to figure out how do we transition those particular properties. And so this is a good example of that. Now, North Nampa probably won't be this. It'll be different. But there is a need for this when we're butting up against that Deer Flat Refuge, like Lowell, ag ground, that we need to transition, yet you want some density. And so when you can go low density, but it's all individual big yards, but then the wildlife can't pass through, and so that's where the people are kind of up in arms. This particular plan is a wonderful opportunity because you do have a little bit higher density. It still fits within the low density designation that we have committed that we would stay to, while also providing opportunity for that wildlife to still be in that area. So when you're in an area specifically abutting that, that's where this comes in. Different than probably North Nampa, correct? So anyway, thank you for helping us, tie those together.
You bet. Thank you, Mayor. And lastly, with Tom's discussion this morning, if there are areas along, particularly the Boise River, where we need to do water storage, this would be an opportunity to have that occur. So I'd be glad to take any questions.
Here?
Yes.
Randy can go first.
You sure? Okay. Yeah, I was just going to, and Doug, I was just going to say, these type of developments, especially if they're a mixed-use approach, the cluster aspect of it really works well for 55 and older, aging in place, because obviously you can integrate a lot more of a mix so that families can be close together, but I've seen it done very successfully. We've been involved with several projects like this, and I would, again, just emphasize the fact that we need to be open-minded when we look at these type of projects.
Councilman Griffins.
Mayor, I was curious because it had been brought up. We were talking about master plan communities. I'm butt up right to one. Is the Trilogy community on Flamingo and Orchard still planning to move forward? I know that was planned or hoped to be a master plan community. And it sounds like, based off of what Emily said, that might be the actual first one that's been proposed.
Yeah, Councilman Griffin, that's actually going to be coming before you in August, so we can't discuss it.
Okay. At least my question really was, is it still coming before us?
It's still coming before you, yes.
You answered it. Thank you.
You're welcome.
One thing I would like to say, we have recently had a housing study completed, and that has not come before council yet in a presentation. It maybe came before NDC, I'm not sure. I don't even think it did before NDC. Just real quickly, I grabbed the book. So Nampa needs an additional 8,430 housing units by 2030. We were short back in 2021, 2,441 housing units. That's a lot. In the Treasure Valley, I believe this report says that we need 80,000 new housing units in the next 8 years. So over the past 8 years, we produced approximately 8,380 units per year, but it's going to need to increase the rate of production to roughly 10,000 units
per year, 20% increase is what we're going to need to see for the Treasure Valley, specifically just Nampa. And that's by 2030. Considering it's halfway through 2024, that we have a shortage of 8,430. That's how many more we need. We had a speaker come in recently, and I believe the title of the gentleman's book was that homelessness is a housing problem, which is a funny thing, but the reality is we are currently on target to move into a critical homeless situation, and it has to do with the affordability of housing and the shortage of supply. And so when you have a shortage in your supply and it's become unaffordable, you have families that are not traditionally homeless that are facing homelessness. And you know, we all talk about it, what can our kids afford? What I love about a master planned community, and we've talked about it for so long, is the diversity of housing needs. When you develop it from the onset in a master planned community, people know what's going to be next door. You may have a much higher density sitting right next to a lower density, and just 2 blocks over, you've got larger, even lower density with larger lots, but it's planned that way. People desire to live in that environment, and they all enjoy the same amenities. The challenge that we're facing here is not in my backyard. And we hear it all the time, sitting here at the bench. Nope, don't want it in my backyard. And it's because it's coming in after something else is already there. It's usually single-family homes, and then you have a little higher density coming in. But it's I'm going to say the older development style of standard streets, yards. I mean, and there aren't amenities. One of our goals as a city is to improve movement in and through Nampa. One of the ways we do that is ensuring that we have the different pods of commerce, access to coffee shops, grocery stores, all of that planned in our housing development. And so the master plan community is really, really important, in my opinion, to the future of our community to get away. It's going to reduce traffic, improve the flow in and through our community. The other thing that's going to happen, when we approved the industrial area in North Nampa, this was a partnership with Urban Renewal within DC, where they funded the infrastructure. But we had a whole group of property owners come in together, and they annexed in together, and they began the process. Because they did that, and because there was a plan in place, what's happened is that has developed. For a developer to have to work with multiple property owners is really time-consuming, but the fact that we already had, the land was zoned, it was all in a group, then the various entities coming in to purchase it was much, much easier for them. And I think that's where this master plan community piece comes in, that we've got to have a mindset of, yes, we're going here, and it's going to make it a lot easier, and it's also going to help us fulfill the need we have for the housing that we have to have because of the shortage. Yes.
Mayor, just another question, and this could go to Doug, but it might be focused more on Mark and Emily. Not naming other developers' names at the bench, in the North Nampa area, I know you know of individuals who own lots of 5-acre, 10-acre, 20-acre parcels. Is the development community in sync with what they want to do in North Nampa in regard to master planned communities?
Maybe while they're coming up, maybe I can speak to that real quick. One thing to keep in mind is that we have done some specific area plans for that area, right? So we have worked with each one of those, at least 10 acres or more. We contacted each one of those property owners or developers in that area and said, here's this plan we're trying to put together. We refined it down to, okay, here's what we'd like to see in this area. So first time ever, we have a much more detailed plan than the comprehensive plan for that North Nampa area. And if developers come in, they have that to look at, and it also helps us with locating schools. You mentioned that earlier. In that specific area plan, we're also working with the schools to say, where do you need to provide a school? And it might not be a specific location, but it'll be a general area. And then when the master plan communities come in, they know we've identified that in our specific area plan, and they know to work with the school, and maybe they can have a partnership where they have a school and then housing surrounding that. So that's some of the ways we're handling that.
Mayor and Councilman Griffin. Yes, so I would say that with regards to North Nampa, I was going to say exactly what Rodney said, is that there is a specific area plan, and the outreach that your staff did on that specific area plan was phenomenal. So I remember going to some of the meetings that staff held out at the Franz Whitty barn, and Mark knows, almost all of the landowners out there, whether they're long-term farmers or new developers, and I think we saw all of them there. So there was great attendance for that and contribution to that. And then what I would also say, just with regard to master plan communities, there are going to be, like you have anywhere, maybe a 5-acre home or a 10-acre portion that is not within that master plan community, but I think the really beautiful thing is that the master plan community is another step of solidifying the comprehensive plan. So you have that wonderful plan, that specific area plan, but then when you bring a master plan community in and you show a pathway, like let's pretend there's a 10-acre out parcel, which is big enough to redevelop. There's, and you show a pathway, and then you skip over the 10 acres, and then you show the same pathway continuing. That's going to provide even more of a great template and planning for that future growth, that when that 10 acres does come in eventually, then they follow suit, and it's just much more of a natural progression into developing that 10-acre out parcel.
One last comment that I'm thinking of is that one of the challenges we've faced, especially in different areas, has to do with the county approving development in the midst of our master planned area. And again, I'm going to just applaud our team for working so closely with the county. We've made a lot of headway recently. We still have some situations where when a 10-acre parcel is approved for a subdivision with wells and septics in the middle of our impact area, it makes it really difficult to develop, because then the sidewalks aren't necessarily continued and whatever, and that's really challenging, and we do have some of those. It would be nice to transition them in, but the work that has been done in these area-specific plans, and then the council approving those and being aware of them, is huge in our move forward. And so I thank you to staff for the work, but thank you for the communication with the county, because a lot of this is not annexed yet. So what the county does with it prior to getting annexed is hugely impactful to us as a city. And so thank you. Yes, Councilwoman.
Mayor Doug,
yes.
asking for a friend. Dwelling units per acre, how many does IKEA require?
IKEA.
Whatever it is, we need more of that, okay? I'm just saying, per my friend.
Mayor, Councilmember Jingula, I think that's a regional question. Yeah.
It was a joke, you're good. No answer needed.
That was great, yeah. Okay, any other questions? Any other comments?
No, thank you, Mayor.
Really good job, thank you, yes.
Yeah.
David Bills?
I think you would like to speak.
Oh, David. Hi, David. Unfortunately, I forgot. Do you have a comment? Question?
Well, I was going to comment that I think it's important on the master plan as well as cluster development that we are very proactive on those items. I think over the years in Nampa, the marketplace didn't allow for such items. And now that the marketplace has changed in terms of the economics is allowing it, the difficulty is, as you already said, people coming out to the public hearings and not wanting certain things. And when they see a large master community, especially those who are on acreage lots that have been pre-approved or done 10 years ago, feel overwhelmed with it. The pressure is on council or the approving body to deny for sake of those other homeowners or property owners. And so I think your comments on having to be proactive is very applicable. I think the mindset needs to be clear on the plans My concern on the cluster side is extending services up to a high density within the rural, and then immediately have conflict with the rural, whether it be farming or the county allowing then a 1 acre, 2 acre plat right next door. I think that was part of the discussion that took place with the county that we had joint session several weeks ago, is if we don't know what the county is really wanting to do or approve, it really affects what we do, especially if we're after the fact. But I applaud the master community, wanted to do it. We tried a little bit, but the economics didn't work 10, 20 years ago, where now it does, seemingly. And that the retailers are wanting to join with the residential in putting that together. So, but it's important to have that mix of different type of housing. That's where it's difficult for me to see some projects like the one at Roosevelt and Middleton asking for apartments, and then the single family says no, no, no. And obviously that's why the master communities are needed, because people then know when they're buying their single family, there's going to be a total mix of housing. So those are my quick comments. Appreciate the discussion this morning.
David, thank you. You know, as you were talking, Councilman Bills, I should say, one thing that it reminds me of, and I can't remember exactly how to term it, but one of our zoning code, I want to say requirements, in the past had these little commercial nodes in the midst of, and so we were looking for these commercial nodes, but they didn't work. And they didn't work with that style of zoning. And it was back then, 10 years ago and 15 years ago. Today, retail in a master planned area, as you just shared so well this morning, they plan to come into that because they know the density that's coming. It's a different concept, but it allows for the commercial nodes to be in the midst of the residential, which is what we need. But it's the new look of how do you design for that? Because as you guys know, remember we pulled it out, and I think Meridian did too, these little required commercial nodes because they weren't working. And so, but I'm excited about this. I'm really excited about it. So thank you for the work. Thank you to the Bottles team for being here. And thank you to staff for working with the county, for working with the developers to ensure that we have a really good plan as we move forward. So great job. Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate
Thanks,
it.
Mayor.
Thanks, guys. And with that, that concludes our meeting today, and I would stand for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.